Ben & Jerry's making headlines again and again for all the wrong reasons. Stakeholders in the brand's parent company Unilever now suing over the company's anti-Israel boycott, and now, to make things worse, reports revealing that Ben & Jerry's are forcing its employees to sit through political lectures on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict run by known Israel critics. Joining me to discuss this, Chair and CEO of the International Legal Forum, Arsen Ostrovsky. Hello.
Hi, good to be here. Thank you.
So starting with the political video introduction, is a company allowed to obligate its employees to do such a thing?
Are they allowed? Yes, most likely. But the issue here is that this is indoctrination. Full stop. This is a company that they should be teaching their new employees how to make ice cream. That is their core business, not indoctrinating them in hatred and racism. That is not their core business, but they're seeking to make that. So it's really quite unfortunate. What is even more, I would suggest, disconcerting here is, as you mentioned in the introduction, the person they chose to give this supposed educational lecture, the man by the name of Omar Shakir from Human Rights Watch. We have to remember that Omar was actually essentially expelled from Israel a number of years ago precisely because of his activities promoting and endorsing the BDS boycott, the Western sanctions movement against Israel. So this is the authority, so to speak, that they're using in order to educate or indoctrinate their people. And even just recently, since being essentially expelled from Israel, we now see Omar continuing activities that are very hostile towards Israel, that are promoting an extremist point of view, and that are in many ways whitewashing and justifying Palestinian terror against Israel. So this is the person who they are essentially having lecture their staff about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yeah, and what happens if an employee disagrees with these political motives? Would Ben & Jerry's not hire them?
Look, potentially that could be the case. Ben & Jerry's is it's a corporation. You don't have to work for them. But there are also some strict laws, for example, against discrimination in the workplace and other areas which prevent companies from enforcing certain policies or obligations upon employees. So it's something that needs to be looked at in further detail. But there certainly is a possibility, and indeed a quite strong likelihood, that Ben & Jerry's is in violation of certain workplace obligations and laws here.
Mm-hmm. And why hasn't Israel taken actions against Unilever? A member of Knesset, Simcha Rotman, urging the government to cancel all benefits afforded to the company.
Look, that's a good question. There's certainly various actions that are being done both here in Israel and overseas. The government is in a position where we do have legislation on the BDS movement, so we've been action before in the past. But this is in some ways a more complicated and nuanced legal matter. But there are certainly avenues for the Israeli government to take action against not just Ben & Jerry's, but more specifically against the parent company Unilever, who ultimately are the ones who they own the company, and ultimately the responsibility rests with them. So there are possible ramifications and courses of action that the Israeli government can take, including with respect to taxation and other penalties. And that's something that we'll need to see if that will gain any wind.
And what do you think the Israeli franchise will do at the end of the contract with Ben & Jerry's? After all, the franchise has been forbidding from selling in Judea and Samaria, which is both against the franchise beliefs as well as against Israeli law.
Look, that's a terrific question. I'm not sure it's entirely clear at this stage. The lease expires at the end of this year, and Ben & Jerry's has made it very clear that not only that they do not want to operate in Judea and Samaria, but they made very clear, including by the chairman of the board, that they do not want to operate in Israel at all. So this isn't just a supposed boycott of the settlements, which is bad and potentially illegal in its own right, but it's essentially a boycott of Israel as a whole. So this is something we need to keep in mind But it really depends on, there's a number of legal actions that are on foot at the moment. So it really depends on how these legal suits unfold. There may well be possible negotiation on foot as well in terms of possibility of renewing the license, but it really remains to be seen. We also really should see how the next few months will really play out in terms of the legal cases unfolding, and I would add not just the legal cases, but also the political pressure both here in Israel and in the United States. We've seen, at least a dozen states at the moment already divesting from Unilever, and legal action, regulatory action being taken by the authorities there as well.
Mm-hmm. And now on top of shareholders suing Unilever, Ben & Jerry's has lost millions and has cost Unilever millions more because of their boycotts. None of this is moving Ben & Jerry's from their political anti-Israel approach?
It's not, because, I think the ultimate ones who are suffering here are Unilever, one as a corporation, and Unilever's shareholders. So it's almost as if Ben & Jerry's, they're completely indifferent to how the parent company is receiving the fallout. I think the pension funds have now divested almost $1 billion from Unilever. We've seen Unilever stock down some 20% since they announced the boycott, and the market barely hasn't moved, or only a few percent in that time. So it's grossly disproportionate. But Ben & Jerry's, I think, are entirely set in their ways. They have an extremist, so-called social policy virtuous agenda, where they don't care about the consequences or ramifications. And this really poses a lot of questions for Unilever in terms of how they proceed forward. Do they retain Ben & Jerry's as an arm of their overall conglomerate? Do they try and sell it off? Obviously, it's causing not only financial distress, but as we've seen, a lot of political headaches from states that are divesting, from the Securities and Exchange Commission that is investigating them, as well as attorney generals and other political recourse. So there's a lot of questions at the end of the day for Unilever as to how they proceed with respect to Ben & Jerry's.
Yes, so sad. Arsen Ostrovsky, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.